Our speaker today is a person who has no problems keeping his audience alive and keeping his speeches upbeat and exciting. Our first speaker today is Karl Grieve, and his speech project is project number 6, Vocal Variety. With vocal variety, the idea is to use vocal variety smoothly and naturally, using the characteristics of volume, pitch, rate, pace, all to add meaning and interest to his message. Karl has proven that he is a mental person through his stories of biking, mountain climbing, driving, even dating. And we all know Karl can convey his message with not only his voice, but his hands and his legs and his head, everything. Karl is very, very expressive. So today's speech won't necessarily be a challenge in terms of the ability to express himself. Today's challenge comes in the form because Karl's giving his speech on system models. And this is actually, the title of it is Powerflow Modeling. And he's only going to give us a short snippet. And typically Karl gives a 40 to 50 minute presentation to all of his new engineers talking about how he interfaces with MISO, with Reliable at First, with the NERC standards, budgeting, distribution, all kinds of, Karl will get into it today, but he assured us that it's not going to be the dissertation that he typically gives, but just a taste. Timer, could I have 5 to 7 minutes on the clock? And Karl's two other objectives is he'd like to challenge himself, because this is a business presentation. Can he use vocal variety appropriately to reinforce his topic? And his second personal objective, he'll be using an easel versus using PowerPoint slides. So we would like to ask, is he using the easel appropriately? So with that, I would like us to all welcome Karl Grieve with his title, Speech Powerflow Modeling.
Good morning, everyone. As Joyce said, this is part of a longer presentation that I do to newly hired, mainly double E's and MEs who go into the electric and gas. What they do is visit various areas through the company and figure out what are these places doing. It kind of gives the new engineers an overall idea of how it is, what we do in our business and how we do it and who are the people. So I had this presentation that, again, takes a lot longer, but I wanted to pull out one piece and see how it works on you guys. And what I'm going to talk about is our system. This is my world, day in, day out. This represents the T&D network that used to be all consumers, but back several years ago, we sold off the 345 kV, which is this red part, and the 138 kV to METSI, which is Michigan Electric Transmission Company. And we own still all of the 46 kV and a few little bits of the 138 kV. And what I want to talk about is the model that we create. This is just a little bit of a detail from that other map. And we look at things from a high level and from a low level. This is all the distribution network. So these are the lines that are running out behind houses, through city streets and things like that. We don't model all this directly, but we have all this data that we pull up so we know where the hospitals are. We know how many customers are out there. We know where all the distribution caps are. We aggregate all this information up to these substations. And then we also pull in all the data from the transmission system, even though we don't own it anymore, because this is an interconnected model. I mean, you can see this from this diagram here, that all this stuff overlaps. It acts completely different from the electricity in your house. Say you've got the toaster and the microwave, and then you hit the coffee pot and you pop the breaker down in the panel. That circuit goes out, and whoever's taking a shower isn't suddenly taking a shower in the dark. This system behaves completely differently. That's what I drew this picture for. It's an interconnected system. There are many paths that go between, and in this case, these are like utilities you can imagine. And this is something that lawyers like to do, is they like to say, okay, we're going to have 100 megawatts that this generator in company A, utility A, is going to sell to some factory in utility B. So the lawyers who like to meddle, not to be confused with metal, but who like to meddle in our engineering affairs, will write a contract to say, send 100 megawatts from A to B. Well, that's the lawyer world. Here's the engineer world. This is the world I live in. That 100 megawatt transaction actually goes from A to B. Maybe 50 megawatts goes along this line, but then we have another 10 that goes out through here, and 5 that goes up through there, and 5 through there, 30 here, 6 there. And it all spreads out across the network. And eventually, you'll get 14, 50, 36, that all adds up to 100 megawatts. The problem is that the system changes constantly. Loads are coming up, everybody plugs in, like I say, their coffee makers, hair dryers, and things like that in the morning. Load goes up, people turn on their air conditioners on a hot summer day, load goes up, and the generation has to match that. So these flows are constantly changing throughout the network. And another thing is, too, is that what happens if you lose this line? Say there's a storm runs through and you get a lightning strike on this line, suddenly 5 megawatts goes away. Well, it doesn't mean that this gets 5 fewer megawatts, it just means that the flows completely redistribute themselves throughout the network. So what we have in our group is we create this model, and we have software that simulates this. So we can look at all these different scenarios where what happens if we turn up generation here, what happens if we turn up generation here, what happens if this line goes out of service, what happens if this line goes out of service. Now there's another thing that's interesting, and this is one of the reasons why I like what I do, that beyond just the megawatts are what heat your coffee, light your light bulbs. There's this whole other thing we call reactive power that also flows across these same wires. And it's kind of like Star Trek. It's out of phase, for those of you who are Trek fans. It's out of phase. And in some cases we call it imaginary power, and I almost hate to use that word because imaginary comes from the mathematical imaginary number, which is some of the mathematics that we use to model it. So even as we're looking at these transactions, there's another case where these lawyers are saying, I'm going to sell 100 megawatts. Well, we've got all these other imaginary power flows, reactive power flows, that are flowing throughout the network. And if you look here, you can even see that they're not necessarily the same amounts, and they don't even flow in the same directions. So for 50 megawatts flowing along this line, you might have 25 megavars. That's what we call reactive power, measured in vars. You might have 25 megawatts flowing this way. Well, here's another case. You have 30 megawatts, but you get 30 megavars going in the opposite direction. It's crazy. But it all makes sense if you understand the engineering behind it. And that's what makes this stuff fun. You do all these simulations, you've got stuff going on all over the place, so it's not an easy problem to solve. And this is just clearly some sort of simple system. Now you multiply that by the whole network. So we've got the state of Michigan here. All this black system represents a 46 kV. And then you've got METSI overlaying that. And the thing is, with this interconnected system, it even extends out to here. So that there are flows in here that can affect what's going on in here. And the fun thing is, too, that you even get flows that will duck down, as we say it, one set of utilities wires and pop back up in another place. I'm going to finish out with the last slide here, that I started out here, and now I expand out to here, that this is the model that Jeff imports from the NERC model. And basically, the entire eastern half of the US, and even this is even beyond the Mississippi, is one gigantic machine that operates synchronously. So every generator within this entire area is trying to run in lockstep with all the other generators. And this is one of the cases where, if you recall the blackout that we had several years ago, it was a case where generation and load got out of sync with each other and the generators went unstable. So it's amazing that you have this huge, gigantic, synchronously operated machine that's changing from moment to moment. We're responsible for just the care and feeding of that little piece right there. Now, normally I would go on and do a live demonstration of our Powerflow, but I don't have time to do that, and it really gets beyond the scope of what I want to talk about today. So I'm going to leave it at that. Hopefully you get a little bit of insight and understanding into what it takes to model the electric grid. Thank you.
Please take 1 minute to give Karl some feedback on those forms that are in front of you.
And I will just use that time to do this, so I don't forget it and leave it up.